واتل ما أوحي إليك من كتاب ربك لا مبدل لكلماته ولن تجد من دونه ملتحدا.
الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala with Surah Al-Kahf and the Tafseer of Imam Al-Sa'di rahimahullah, and verse number 54 and 55 inshallah. 54 and 55, and if we have time we'll continue inshallah. يقول الله عز وجل: ولقد صرفنا في هذا القرآن للناس من كل مثل وكان الإنسان أكثر شيء جدلا وما منع الناس أن يؤمنوا إذ جاءهم الهدى ويستغفروا ربهم إلا أن تأتيهم سنة الأولين أو يأتيهم العذاب قبلا وما نرسل المرسلين إلا مبشرين ومنذرين ويجادل الذين كفروا بالباطل ليدحضوا به الحق واتخذوا آياتي وما أنذروا هزوا. The translation: and we have certainly diversified in this Quran for the people from every kind of example, but man has ever been most of anything prone to dispute. And nothing has prevented the people from believing when guidance came to them and from asking forgiveness of the Lord, except that there must befall them the accustomed precedent of the former peoples, or that the punishment should come directly before them. And we send not the messengers except as bringers of good tidings and warners, and those who disbelieve dispute by using falsehood to attempt to invalidate thereby the truth, and have taken my verses and that of which they are warned in ridicule. So the ayah وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ لِلنَّاسِ مِنْ كُلِّ مَثَلٍ. So now this is as part of the ikhbar. As previously mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is informing humanity and informing the believers. One of the things of the Quran, وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ, in this Quran. He says in the Tafseer, يُخْبِرُ تعالى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is informing عن عظمة القرآن, about the exaltation of the Quran, the greatness of the Quran, وَجَلَالَتِهِ, al-jalal, that it's perfect praise and exalted, وعمومه, that it so covers everything, وأنه صرف فيه, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala صرف فيه. صرف, التصريف, as we said, it can be used in many different ways. Here it means that brought many different things in it. Very, there's so much diversities in the Quran in all kinds of things. In the same subject, you won't find just one evidence for Tawheed. All kinds of different evidences that are not even under the same category of way of convincing or evidences. Many different evidences. Just the subject of the evidences, or rulings, or different subjects and different things that would affect the hearts and means of guidance. So, but here specifically, min kulli mathal, from every mathal, every parable that would make the meanings very easy and clear to the people, so that no one will have an excuse of saying, I don't want to understand what the meanings of things. And of course, the amthal is mentioned in the Quran. It's mentioned, we just went through some of the amthal that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, or the mathal, when He gave us the what is this life is all about versus the hereafter, so that no one will have any mistaken understanding the reality of this life. So يخبر تعالى عن عظمة القرآن وجلالته وعمومه وأنه صرف فيه, that He صرف in the Quran, diversified in the Quran so many different ways, من كل مثل, from every مثل. المثل, parable, the like, examples, things of that nature. أي من كل طريق, the meaning of مثل here, من كل طريق. He made so many different paths, موصل, that would make you reach clearly, straightforward, in the easiest and the most perfect way, إلى العلوم النافعة, to the benefiting knowledge, والسعادة الأبدية, and the everlasting happiness, وكل طريق يعصم من الشر. And also the Quran gives us and the knowledge of every path that would protect you from evil, والهلاك, and destruction. ففيه أمثال الحلال والحرام. As an example, it has the examples or the parables of the halal والحرام. What's halal, what's haram. وجزاء الأعمال, the recompense of the actions, exactly as what a person, everybody, what they need, it's already explained. والترغيب والترهيب, the encouragements, the rewards are mentioned, the warnings. والأخبار الصادقة النافعة للقلوب, and the akhbar, what we have been informed of, matters of unseen, the nations before, that is truthful, and whatever is mentioned is what's benefiting to the hearts, not details that is of no benefit. Everything, every letter of it is for a benefit, for a reason, for people to benefit, for the hearts to benefit. And that's why al-akhbar al-sadiqa, he mentioned here specifically the hearts, because it's either a matter of unseen that a person has to believe in, or stories of the past that's supposed to affect the hearts. You're not going to go at the time of Musa alayhi salam and try to fix things, or you're not addressed by what the people of Musa alayhi salam were addressed by in their time. But it's the same rulings, yes, so that the person with his heart reflect and act accordingly. اعتقادا, that's what he's saying, belief, so that's the matter of belief. وطمأنينة, tranquility. ونورا, light, that a person is able to see. وهذا مما يوجب التسليم لهذا القرآن. This and more of these meanings, then it makes it by necessity an obligation to submit oneself التسليم لهذا القرآن, to this Quran, وتلقيه بالانقياد والطاعة, and to receive the Quran. Each and every one of us, we should receive the Quran like this, with submission, with obedience, وعدم المنازعة له, not to have any dispute with the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala في أمر من الأمور, in any of its matters whatsoever. This is because this is kalamullah. And if we talk about a Muslim, believing in the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the matter is a very obvious thing. And that's why when people start to argue about things that are very clear in the deen of Allah, it's now what's the issue here? Is a person a believer or a disbeliever? If he's a disbeliever, then we're going to go back and give him da'wah, right, to believe. If he believes, this is kalamullah, this is the speech of Allah. What is the dispute? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered someone to do something that is completely against what he thinks and what his desire and what his reasoning or whatever a person might think, but he knows that this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does he have a say? Answer is no. So he's not questioning the wisdom of the commands, why we are asked to do this, why do we have to do this. It's not for the believers. The disbelievers, maybe they question these things in which there is answers of course, but not to waste too much in the answers, but rather to go back and to find the root cause of this, the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to prove that this is wahy from Allah. And who are you as a human being to say or to dispute with the creator of the heavens and earth? As if someone is saying disputing, they're very, very angry and arguing. Why do we have eyes? Why do we have ears? You know, a person, I wanted to be like a mountain. You know, mountains are mighty, strong. Why do, and this is a foolish thing, right? People don't argue with these things. Why do we breathe air? It's better that if you breathe water, oxygen under the fish. The physical things, it's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the one that created these things. Why don't you have a dispute with it? Why don't you have a dispute with the fact that you have been created? The same thing when it comes to the wahy from Allah. أَلَا لَهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ. So work on yourself to believe. Find out. Have the truthfulness. Go see what's out there. Search the matter. You know, find the truth yourself. Once you find it, that means you believe that this is the words of Allah. So the words of Allah, that means that people have to submit themselves to it. ومع ذلك, so after, with all of this, كان كثير من الناس يجادلون في الحق بعدما تبين. That many of the people would argue, dispute in the truth after it's made clear. ويجادلون بالباطل ليدحضوا به الحق, and they would make الجدال. The jidal is arguments. So al-jidal either can be with the haqq in truth or in falsehood. So if it's with the truth and a person is expressing the truth, there's nothing wrong with it. But if it's with falsehood, of course, this is evil. And if it's with the truth, but the other side is not listening, or the matter has been made clear and is just waste, then a person should abstain from not just wasting his time, but with, abstain from going down into the level with arguing with batil versus batil. Haqq is wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, ومع ذلك كان كثير من الناس يجادلون في الحق. يجادلون في الحق, that means they dispute or argue against the truth. بعدما تبين, after it's made clear, ويجادلون بالباطل. Little linguistics here, as you see, يجادلون في versus يجادلون بي. Right? يجادلون في الحق, that means they are arguing against the حق. ويجادلون بالباطل, their content of the arguments is falsehood. They're not coming from a truthful principle. You know, they're coming from falsehood. So that means whatever outcome is going to be also falsehood. And their intention, ليدحضوا به الحق. That's what a person is in dispute. He wants to defeat the truth, but أن لهم ذلك, there is no way for them to defeat the truth. Physically, they can fight with one another and one can defeat the others. But non-physical, meaning no one can ever defeat the truth. But as mentioned before, people have to know the truth. If people have the knowledge of the truth, no one can defeat them in arguments. No one whatsoever. One alim of the haqq, of the truth, if he faced all humanity with falsehood, they would never defeat him in arguments. But not according to their corrupted principles that they invented. And we have in the messengers of Allah the best example in this. And what is the content, what the messengers had is wahi from Allah. And al-ulama warathatul anbiya. And the people of knowledge are the inheritors of the Prophet. So it's all about the wahi from Allah. This is the haqq. Not because this guy is like this or the person is another. The haqq is the wahi. Anything other than the wahi from Allah, it's not ma'soom. It's not protected. It's not necessarily the ultimate truth. ولهذا قال وكان الإنسان أكثر شيء جدلا. That the human being, this is part of being human being. وكان الإنسان, and kana, even though it's a past tense, but when it comes in this context like this, that means this is the norm of the human beings, before and after. So watch, make sure that you don't fall into the weakness that human beings they have. أكثر شيء جدلا. He's the most thing in jadal. He likes to argue so much in any matter. You know, even you find a child, once he start having the smallest amount of aql, he wants to argue, right? So this is how human beings are, which is there's a good side of it. But if someone is completely ignorant, right, and he comes and argue, it's you laugh at what he's saying. So a person has to have knowledge first before he start to argue. He has to have knowledge of what he's arguing about. So he says here, أي مجادلة. Human beings كان الإنسان أكثر شيء جدلا. That means مجادلة ومنازعة, always arguments, always disputes, whether it's in matters of wahy and deen and the truth versus falsehood, or even with one another, even with the closest ones, husband and wife, all the time, right? And buying and selling and disputes and issues. That's why there's courts and there is judges and there's lawyers and all kinds of things. وكان الإنسان أكثر شيء جدلا أي مجادلة ومنازعة فيه. And that's why when at the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the judge was not having any job to do. No disputes coming because they understood what the wahi is, so nobody had any dispute with anyone. So then it says وأن مع أن ذلك غير لائق بهم. This is not mentioned as this is the norm, so it's okay. No, it does not befit the human beings to be like this, to be always what's condemned أكثر شيء جدل, arguing about every single matter. This is something they should stay away from. It does not befit them when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored them. ولا عدل منهم, and it's not just from them to be always arguing about every matter. والذي أوجب له ذلك, what made the human being to be like this, وعدم الإيمان بالله, especially when the arguments is about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and disbelieving in Allah. Why that happens? إنما هو الظلم والعناد. The ظلم, the injustice, the stubbornness. And these are very clear words and meanings, right? You can even, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us and would afflict, put in ourselves, we all had a moment of stubbornness, if it's not lots of moments, right? And you know in yourself that you're being stubborn. And you know that the other side is right. But I'm going to look bad if I say something else. Your child, for example, your wife, right? And this is how human beings, they have that greed in them. And a person needs definitely to repent to Allah, but it's a higher level of goodness that a person defeat his own self and his own ego, that even in the most heated argument, if there is, if he hears the truth, he should humble himself to the truth. And he says, yes, you're right. And no excuses. The Sahaba used to be like this. And there are many examples in this. The ulama like this. Imam Malik sitting, giving durus, Imam of the dunya at this time. This is not my statement. This is how Imam described them. the Imam of the world at the time. No one has more knowledge than him. People come from the east and the west. He says something, and someone corrects him, right? And he, in the open, in front of everyone, that I made a mistake, and so corrected me, and now this is this. This is how things are. This is the truth, is the objective, and no one can ever claim to have all of the truth. And whoever think that, or he thinks of his sheikh or his person that he follows or whatever there is, that he does not make any mistakes, does not say anything wrong, that means that's the Prophet ﷺ. That means something wrong with him, or something wrong with you, or something wrong with everybody. So this is what human beings are. But then you see how even, I'm sorry, I'm taking also more here, but when you look even at the virtual world, people, whenever one mistake happens, then that person is not left alone. Right? People do not understand how to recognize things based on the wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Arguing about every single matter, and they think that this is, mashallah, intellect, and this is how a person is good. No, this is condemned in the Quran. كان الإنسان أكثر شيء جدلا. So no justice from them because of that. Al-dhulm wal-inad. And if we have, inshallah ta'ala, time, this needs lectures from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the things that deter people from the truth. There are many things, one of which is this injustice, al-inad, stubbornness. لا لقصور في بياني وحجتي وبرهاني, not because of deficiency necessarily in his bayan, the way to articulate himself and to speak, or his hujjah, evidences. It's not because of this. وإلا فلو جاءهم العذاب. So it's not about this, it's about the stubbornness. It's about the dhulm that a person would be upon. فلو جاءهم العذاب. If the punishment then comes to them, because the matter has been made clear and they still argue, then they're given the time, but they did not repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they did not embrace the truth. Then when it's the time for the punishment to come, as they have been warned, وَجَاءَهُمْ مَا جَاءَ قَبْلَهُمْ, and came to them what came to the nations before, لَمْ تَكُنْ هَذِي حَالُهُمْ, then their affairs would not be the same. They won't be stubborn then. And we hear the verses in the Quran as the mujrimun, when they see the hellfire, they used to be all that in this world and no one can dispute with them, and they have all kinds of evil arguments, but then in the Day of Judgment they look from a طرف خفي and they are humiliated. And so that means repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before it gets to that stage, because either way you have to acknowledge the truth. You have to humble yourself to the truth. If a person does not humble himself to the truth in this life, he will humble to it in the hereafter, but in the hereafter, the humbling then, it's not a good deed. It's a punishment. Right? So therefore, the humbling oneself to the truth, this is one of the duties of a believer at all times. To humble oneself to the haqq. And the truth is the ultimate thing based on the wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not based on one's own weakness of reasoning and things like this. And that's why وما منع الناس أن يؤمنوا إذ جاءهم الهدى ويستغفروا ربهم إلا أن تأتيهم سنة الأولين أو يأتيهم العذاب قبلا. وما منع الناس, what prevented the people from al-iman, from believing, when guidance came to them, and what prevented them from seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? أي ما منع الناس من الإيمان, what prevented the people from al-iman, faith. والحال, and the state that they're in is أن الهدى الذي يحصل به الفرق, the guidance, that the separation بين الهدى والضلال, between guidance and deviation, والحق والباطل, and the truth and falsehood, قد وصل إليهم, had reached them. So وقامت عليهم حجة الله, and the evidence from Allah has been established upon them. So this is what وما منع الناس أن يؤمنوا, if they did not believe because the message didn't reach them, or because they're insane, or because they were very old in age and they could not comprehend things, they have an excuse. But here, إِذْ جَاءَهُمُ الْهُدَى, that this is their state. Guidance came to them, and guidance means that this is clear, that this is the haqq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wahi from Allah. And as a result of that, وَيَسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّهُمْ, and they would repent to Allah and seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what prevented them while they're in that state? فَلَمْ يَمْنَعْهُمْ, did not prevented them عَدَمُ الْبَيَانِ, that it's not clear, the bayan, the clarity is not there. بل منعهم الظلم والعدوان على الإيمان. What prevented them then, if they are like that, is injustice, transgression away from al-iman. فلم يبقى, what's left is إلا أن تأتيهم سنة الله, What is going to come to them is the way of Allah. Sunnatullah is the way of Allah. وعادته في الأولين. The way of Allah. The way that it's been established in Al-Awwalin, in the early generations, the prophets before, as it's stated in the Quran, every nation, a prophet is sent to them. He's calling them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they go back and forth, and the punishment does not come right away, and there are arguments back and forth, and spending time with them till once the matter becomes clear. And what's left is nothing but dhulm, inad, stubbornness. It is not that a person, oh, maybe I have an issue. Can I clarify this? Are you sure that this? What? It's not like this. Everything is exhausted, and everything is conveyed in the most perfect way, and more even time, so that they would enjoy their evil actions. Then, what is the sunnah of Allah? Then the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes to them after even they're warned that this is going to happen to them. So this is the justice of Allah, not from the very beginning. إلا أن تأتيهم سنة الله وعادته. Al-ada is the customs. This is the way that is never missed. So it's always, and it did not change. The only thing that changed, that happened after the Prophet ﷺ has sent and before that, is that the destruction, not necessarily like the people of Nuh and the people of Ad, because now the truth is there, and there are other ways where the punishment, even the believers, they punish them. They punish those who disbelieve and things like this in the proper ways. But here, فَلَمْ يَبْقَ إِلَّا أَن تَأْتِيَهُمْ سُنَّةُ اللَّهِ وَعْدَتُهُ فِي الْأَوَّلِينَ مِنْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذَا لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا, that if they don't believe, عُوجِلُوا بِالْعَذَابِ, the adhab, the punishment will be in haste for them. أَوْ يَرَوْنَ الْعَذَابَ قَدْ أَقْبَلَ عَلَيْهِمْ, or they see the punishment coming towards their way. وَرَأَوْهُ مُقَابَلَةً وَمُعَايَنَةً, and they see it right in front of them. مُعَايَنَةً, they see it with their own eyes. أي فليخافوا من ذلك, so that means let them fear this. وليتوبوا من كفرهم, let them repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from their disbelief. قبل أن يكون العذاب الذي لا مرد له, before the punishment there is no one can push away if it comes. And it shows also how humanity would lose so much when the believers are the physically weak and oppressed, because the evil becomes the one that is widespread, and there's no justice, and it's all kinds of injustices, unless some pockets here and there. The deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the haqq, has the truth, has the ultimate truth in it, and this is with the enemies, with the friends, with the close ones. And the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called the people to be upon the haqq with all of these details. We don't give really the verses its rights the way it's supposed to be, but this is, again, it's meant to be brief. But every word you can see how in the Quran the matter is explained in details. And it goes and it refers to this. You can refer to many verses over and over again, the more that you would read the ayat of the Quran. So here, as we hear, so this is the Quran, one of the characteristics of the Quran, which is Darbul Mithal, giving the examples to make things very clear. The evil nature of the human being if they argue too much. And there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which shows that the Prophet ﷺ quoted the verse, even though this is not something that was a sinful act, but it shows how this is something in the human beings. When the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in his tafseer that when the Prophet ﷺ came to Ali radiallahu anhu and Fatima radiallahu anha during the night, and he said, he knocked on the door during the night. He said, ألا تصليان? Aren't you praying? قيام الليل, the night prayer. So Ali radiallahu anhu, he said, يا رسول الله إنما أنفسنا بيد الله فإذا شاء أن يبعثنا بعثنا. They were sleeping. So he said, O Prophet of Allah, our souls is in the hands of Allah. If He will that He makes us awake, He will make us awake. Nothing wrong with that. فانصرف. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he heard this, he left. Who's the one that is narrating this? Ali radiallahu anhu, to see how, mashallah, he's not keeping this away. He says to the Prophet ﷺ, left, وَلَمْ يَرْجِعْ إِلَيَّ شَيْءٍ. He did not reply to me. He said, don't you pray? Why are you not praying? So when I said what I said to him, he left. He did not reply back. He left, and then I heard him saying, ثُمَّ سَمِعْتُ وَمُوَلٍ يَضْرِبُ فَخِذَهُ, patting on his thigh like this, and saying, وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلٍ. And he would say that the human beings are the most thing in arguments. They like to argue a lot. And this is in Bukhari and Muslim. We do that all the time, right? If someone wakes you up for even Salatul Fajr, what sometimes you would say, what? Okay, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, things people would say, instead of having this humbleness and recognizing, yes, even if it's a recommended act, the person should humble himself and to stay away from this. But it's also an example of verses, even though it talks about the disbelievers, a benefit can be extracted from it in the level of the believers. Not necessarily that it applies as it's mentioned. We'll stop here, inshallah. We'll ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it. By the way, we're doing, so for those who are studying, we're going word by word, so make sure that you read it, inshallah. And after Ramadan, inshallah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, we'll see what the exams are, inshallah. So the attendance code is صرف فيه. صرف فيه. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.